Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared, and today we're talking with Rabbi Gurfein. and I'm not going to pose any questions to him that you've submitted this time, mostly because I wanted to ask you. Right now we're during the holiday season on the Hebrew calendar, and I was just wondering if we could learn a little bit more about, like, for example, Yom Kippur that just happened. And what was that like for you? What is it that you would do on Yom Kippur right now without the
Are
temple?
oh, about the temple? About my stomach. As soon as somebody says don't eat, that's all you think about. It's amazing. When I used to work full time in high tech, it would be like 10 o'clock at night. Whoa, I haven't eaten, but I didn't even miss it. But as soon as somebody says, "Oh, today's a fast," I'm like, I'm starving 3 days before it begins.
Yep, it's just like yawning.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess the challenge is to sort of somehow supersede that and get into the swing of what it's all about, which ironically, many people don't know because they think of it as a very solemn day, which is for sure. And it's a day of atonement, which is for sure. But it's also called the happiest day of the Jewish calendar, which is very bizarre. Because I mean, unless you're into like sadomasochist something, it's like kind of crazy that you'd be out there suffering and torturing and say, "Oh yeah, this is really great," you know. So the question is, in terms of Yom Kippur, how does that really work? This is actually something I spent a lot of time thinking about during Yom Kippur, and even got sacrificed at the altar by being invited in front of my congregation to speak on the subject. So it's sort of fresh on my mind. So I think the thing is like this. The Torah calls Yom Kippur the Shabbos of Shabboses. Like if you remember the Gulf War, like the mother of all wars or whatever. So Yom Kippur is like the mother of all Shabbos, which is really bizarre. On a simple level, it's bizarre. Why? Because on Shabbat, there is actually a commandment to have what's called oneg Shabbat. Oneg is a great Hebrew word which means pleasure. In other words, if a person, let's say, has limited income and through the week they find various delicacies of food, so it's a discussion in the Talmud if they should actually set that aside for Shabbat, so that you would be honoring the Shabbat. Because if you found a really nice piece of, I don't know, chocolate cake or something, you wouldn't eat it right up on a Tuesday. You would make Shabbat special by adding good food to it. And in the course of that, it's even a mitzvah, which is one of my favorite, to nap. I'm extremely ultra orthodox when it comes to that one. So, and I'm also extremely religious when it comes to single malt. So these are things which are all part of the enhancement of the Shabbat experience. In fact, if a person is married, then Friday night is a time for holy relationships. So it's really a holy, but what happens is Yom Kippur comes along, it's just the opposite. Holy relationships with one's wife are prohibited on Yom Kippur. And certainly single malt is gone, and any malt, anything you can't eat, can't drink, can't anoint oil, can't even wear leather shoes. I mean, all these obviously have very deep meaning and so on, but the point is they're diametrically opposed. The immersion into the physical Shabbat with the removal completely into spirituality of Yom Kippur. So I can understand you saying Yom Kippur is a very, very holy day, but how can you attribute it as the Shabbat of all Shabbats when it's diametrically opposed to Shabbat? That's really a kind of a mind-boggling sort of a question. I mean, right? Give it a new name, but don't give it Shabbat and say it's the Shabbat of all Shabbat, because it's nothing like Shabbat. Shabbat is you go into the physical world, and Yom Kippur is you come out of the physical world. Yom Kippur is 24-hour fast. Probably it's more like 27 hours, but who's counting? Actually, me at the very last minutes. But the point is that it's 27 minutes out. 27 hours out of your year that you could be like an angel. Angels don't have sexual relations. Angels don't eat and drink. Angels don't anoint. Certainly angels don't wear shoes at all, let alone leather shoes, right? So for 27 hours, you could be like an angel. But so what?
Quick question about that, because a lot of those things that you listed, that sounds like a lot of the same requirements for Tisha B'Av. Is it like similar as far as like, the leather shoes, not anointing with oil and stuff like that? Because
Well, there are
pretty similar.
similarities, but Tisha B'Av is only a rabbinic ordained fast. So it was modeled after Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is from the Torah itself.
Okay.
So Yom Kippur becomes like the template from which Tisha B'Av is drawn from. So that for sure, that you said, you'll find those similarities.
Are there other days like Tisha B'Av that are, modeled after Yom Kippur? Is it basically just those two?
No, those are the only two which are 27 hours. All other fasts are from sunrise to sunset. And they are some more obvious than the others, but those other fasts are all directly connected to the destruction of the second temple, which of course Tisha B'Av is, but it's also the first temple, and Tisha B'Av goes all the way back to the biblical story of the spies. The day that the spies came back after their 40-day intrusion into Israel and gave over their bad report, and the whole nation cried, that became the inception of what would become Tisha B'Av. In fact, many parents throughout the world use the famous expression when their kids seem to be crying for nothing. They'll say, "Oh yeah, crying for nothing? I'll give you something to cry for." And that's exactly what God said. God said, "What? You're crying for nothing? This will be a day to cry." And thus it was, Tisha B'Av. But Yom Kippur is not real. I mean, yes, you cry, but it's a completely different event. It's, as I said, that's the strange point we're going to try to get to, which is how could it be called the Shabbos of Shabbos when intrinsically it's 180 degrees the opposite experience? And second of all, how could it be that this is called the happiest day of the year? I mean, Purim should be the happiest day of the year, when it's a commandment to get drunk. But how could it be a happy day of Yom Kippur? So the answer is a very deep idea. The idea is really based on what are we doing here? And Shabbat and Yom Kippur have the same inner message, even though superficially they may seem to be expressing it in completely different forms. What is the bottom line? Why are we here? We are, if I can quote Bellucci, we are on a mission from God. We are earthling angels. We are like, when you see people and they go deep sea diving and they're in their little craft, and then they have to put, or astronauts, when they go for a walk, they have to put on all of this equipment. So there are these angels that volunteer for planet Earth. And this is what they put on. They put these things on. And these little vessels carry them from the womb to the tomb. That's what all this is. This isn't really who you are. This is just what you wear, because this is your protective gear for survival on this mission. So therefore, we are a few good angels. We have the toughest of all assignments, because to be an angel is kind of cool and groovy, but big deal. I mean, all due respect to angels, I'm sure they're not enjoying that, but big deal, right? I mean, how hard is it to be an angel? Your vision isn't limited to these little meatballs in your head. You can see everything for what is true. You see a God, you see everything. I mean, it's, how can you not be an angel? If you're an angel, how can you not be an angel? But to be an angel and then come down here into the minds of darkness and lies and deceit and horrors, and then still to perform the will of God, that's extraordinary. That's beyond anything an angel can do. In fact, that was the argument when the angels saw that Moses had come up to heaven to get the Torah. The angels said to God, "Are you kidding? You're gonna give this unbelievably, we can understand how unbelievable this holy writings, you're gonna give it to earthlings that like pass gas and burp? That's where you're gonna give your holy book to?" And so God said to Moses, "Answer the angels." So Moses says to the angels, "Well, I don't know. It says in the Bible, don't steal. Do you steal?" And the angels, "Of course not." So he said, "Well, we do. We steal." So therefore, for us not to steal means we can fulfill the Torah. If you have no desire to steal, you never fulfill the commandment of don't steal. Because it's only when you have a desire, because you see, ooh, nobody's looking. Of course, God is always looking, but you kind of tune that out, right? And therefore you can steal, and you don't do it, not because you're going to get caught, but you don't do it because, as King Solomon says, the thief steals the most from himself. Whatever you steal, it's $50, it's $100, it's $1,000,000, but it's nothing compared to the value of your soul, which you surrender by the fall of theft. So therefore, as a human being, we can fulfill the will of God in the physical world. Physical world, God says eat kosher. God says put on tefillin. God says keep Shabbat. Angels can't do that. So therefore, to come into this world, we are godly angels on the highest level because we're in the lowest level. It's an irony. But there are two tag points that remind us of this. One of them is Yom Kippur. One of them is like where we come up for air. We come back into where our souls really come from with the angels. Hopefully, when we get up there, as our souls come up on Yom Kippur, hopefully there's like you ever watch like in the NFL when the guys come out in the field and everyone's slapping them high five as they're running by? Hopefully, yo, Michael, yo, Gabriel, yo, Raphael, right? Hopefully you're getting like that kind of reception up there. But nonetheless, for 27 hours on Yom Kippur, you go up as a, and then back down. Shabbat also does that for you, but it goes the other way. On Shabbat, the soul gets what's called a neshama yetera, which means an extra soul. Doesn't mean you become like Sybil or schizophrenic or bipolar. That's not what it means by an extra soul. It just means you get more of your soul. X volume of soul can come down into the physical body. However, when a holy day like Shabbat comes, the capability of the amount of that holiness, because 99% of your soul isn't even in your body, it's strung out. Remember the olden days of deep sea divers, they used to have those things that went up for the oxygen. So like our souls are like that. They go all the way up to the throne of God. That's why it's so freaking horrible when a person sins. They don't realize that their soul, their majority of their entity, which will last forever, is standing before God. While that bozo's down there doing who knows what. But the little part of you that's up there standing in front of a guy going, that guy, I'm not really him. Well, you are him. So that holy soul, however, can come more into your body on Shabbat.
Is so this therefore, related to the concept, in Kabbalah with like being a vessel and receiving more? Is it related to that idea? And so on Shabbat, you're receiving more. There's more of you or God emanating down into you. Is that what that means?
Absolutely, because the problem with receiving more in a vessel is if the vessel is not holy or prepared, it will pop. If you put too much boiling hot water into a glass that's not made for boiling hot water, it'll explode. This is called the breaking of the vessels in creation. If the godly light, when in its early stages, the physical forms just couldn't handle it, pop. Like if all of a sudden Moses walked into your room right there, or into my room, we would just like disintegrate. We would just evaporate. We couldn't exist in the presence of such incredible holiness, just the overwhelming light. So therefore, it's according to each one. What you do in your physical world, how you do kindness with the poor people, how you make sure that the poor people have food, that they have jobs, that they have shelter, the things that you do in order to build your community and to care for each person and to visit the sick and to bury the dead with respect. All these physical acts of holiness make your vessel, i.e. your body, stronger. And in heaven, once they register, hey, look at that guy. He actually bumped up to college level holiness. Then they can put more holiness into you. And then when a person's really elevated and radiating, like on a Shabbat, for example, then a wellspring can come into the body. But that again, Yom Kippur is a reminder of our true essence by going up to heaven, by detaching from the physical. Shabbat is also a reminder of our true essence by the holiness coming down into this world. And since they work in these directions, that's why they're the same thing, but they're manifest in different ways. Shabbat, going deeper into the physical world, because now you have more spiritual power. You won't be taken away by it. And Yom Kippur, you have the power to go up by removing yourself from the physical world. That's why Yom Kippur is called the Shabbat of Shabbat, which answers that question. The other question is, how could it be the happiest day? So here's another thing which people don't really realize. There's another major event that happened on Yom Kippur. The Jewish people received the Torah. People think that they received the Torah on the holiday of Shavuot. Well, that's not correct. The holiday of Shavuot was when Moses went up to get the Torah. However, when he came down 40 days later on the 17th day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, there was a tragedy called the Golden Calf going on. And the 2 tablets, or according to Mel Brooks, the 3 tablets, but we go with the Jewish version, the 2 tablets that he came down with, he smashes. And then he says, destroys the golden calf, etc. And then he says, you know what? I think you guys have really screwed up big time, but I'm going to try with all my power to see if I can get us out of this mess. And he goes back up to heaven for another 40 days and he begs forgiveness. All in the Bible, it's all right there in black and white. And therefore, at that end of those 40 days, God says, yes, you are forgiven. That you are forgiven verse is the thread of the Yom Kippur prayer. So he comes back down. He tells the people, guess what? I have unbelievable news. God's going to give you a second chance. And therefore, now I'm going to go back for his 3rd time going up for 40 days. And then when he comes down at the end of the 3rd time of 40 days with the 2nd set of the 2 tablets, that day is Yom Kippur. So
would that be the day that I don't know if there's even this concept in Judaism, but would that be the day that Israel as a people, as a nation, became the covenant people?
No, that was way earlier. The covenant happened already at Mount Sinai.
Oh, before he came down with the
sure, before he went up. That was part of the tradition.
Is there like a particular day that commemorates that?
Yes, that's Shavuot.
Oh, that's Shavuot. Okay.
That's when they heard the first 2 of the 10 commandments.
Okay. So in Shavuot, that's when they became God's covenant people.
Right.
But that's also the time that he went up the first time up Mount Sinai.
Yeah, right. So everyone comes to Mount Sinai. They have the splitting of the Red Sea. They make it now to Mount Sinai. They surround the mountain. The mountain turns into an unbelievable light and sound show. And Moses then prepares the nation. They needed 3 or 4 days of actually getting ready for this event. And then the 10 commandments begin. They heard the first 2 commandments. X% of the nation died from that experience. And their souls just popped out of their body. Another Y% of the nation was literally, no pun intended, blown away. The part that was blown away, the angels had to pick them up and bring them back. And the part that died had to go through resurrection of the dead, which is, of course, one of the 13 principles of belief, resurrection of the dead. And after that, it's in our DNA. So at that point, they turned around and they said to Moses, listen, we got lucky, we came back. But you're telling us now there's 613 of these commandments? Maybe on number 517, we might not come back. So how about you go up there? Because originally God wanted to tell the Torah directly to everybody. But they said, oh, time out. We're going to send you up there, Moses, and, get whatever you can and come back down. But we don't really want to go through this dying, coming back to life every single time, which as a side point, you'll find very interesting. If there's 613 commandments, it would have been really cool if the numerical value in Hebrew, of course, of the word Torah was 613, but it's not. It's 611. Why is the numerical value of Torah 611? Because the Torah is what Moses gave us because we didn't want to get it ourselves. But the first 2 commandments we got ourselves. So it doesn't need to be 613. We already got the first 2, but the other 611, which is Torah, that's what Moses brought back down. But now the receiving of it, we actually get it in your hand, that is Yom Kippur. That's the end of the 3rd of the 40-day intervals of Moses up there. So what does that mean? What's the tie-in between Yom Kippur and receiving the Torah? The answer is where I think you were alluding to before, has to do with every nuance and detail of the service of the high priest performed on Yom Kippur. I mean, I don't want to do a whole drill down on that, and it would be difficult unless your audience has a strong background on all of those events. But nonetheless, it's Aaron, the high priest, Moses' older brother. He's the high priest, and his children later, who were the high priest, every Yom Kippur would either go into the tabernacle or later into the temple, and they would go one day a year into the Holy of Holies. And in this room of the Holy of Holies was something that is magical called the Ark. And the Ark had the two kruvim, I don't know how you, cherubim, I think you pronounce it in English.
Yeah, in English, cherubim, but I guess that would be, is that cherubim in Hebrew?
Yeah, kruvim.
Okay.
Right. Kruvim comes from the karuv, which means to be close to God. So you had the two kruvim, forgive me. I think I always tell you this, when you move to Israel, you don't become bilingual, you become semi-lingual. You sort of lose your English, you don't ever get the real Hebrew, and therefore you're nowhere, as the Beatles would sing. So you have these two kruvim on top of the Ark. Now, there's a wild story I'll share with you about this Ark. Well, you know that in the Ark are the tablets. Okay. In a certain set of the verses in the Bible, when describing the details of the building of the tabernacle, Mishkan we call it, it says that in the Holy of Holies, the distance from one wall to the other wall was 20 amot, which I think they refer to as cubit. I have no idea what a cubit is, and you have no idea what an amot is, but whatever it is, it's a measurement. Mm-hmm. So there are 20 amot from wall to wall. But then, in another section of the Torah, again giving measurements of the tabernacle, Mishkan, it says that the distance from the wall to the beginning of the Ark is 10 amot, and then the Ark itself is 10 amot, and then the distance from the second side of the Ark to the second wall is another 10, which I'm not like a whiz in math, but I think I come up with 30. So the Talmud asks, what is this? On the one hand, God tells us the distance between the two is 20. On the other hand, God tells us the distance, total distance between the two is 30. So it gives a great Jewish answer. And it says that, this is why we're crazy, it says because the Ark occupies no physical space in this world. Now, that's pretty crazy, right? Joshua had the priests holding the Ark as the Jordan River split. King David brings the Ark from, actually just over there, from Abu Ghash into Jerusalem. The Ark is a physical thing that was moved by God. So what is the Talmud telling me? It's telling me it doesn't have physical space in the physical world. It's very physical. Look at its history. I mean, if that's not good enough, just look at Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? That would have been an even cooler ending. They find it, but they couldn't, like their hands would go through it because it doesn't occupy space. But I don't think Spielberg learns enough Torah, unfortunately. Anyhow, so the point is, what does this mean? And the answer is very deep and very important. The answer is that the Ark and its two tablets, the two tablets represent right brain and left brain, are like our thoughts. A person doesn't go a second in life without a thought every single second. Hopefully holy ones and good ones, but not always. And on the bad ones, we clean them up on Yom Kippur. But we are our thoughts. Touch one. Grab hold of a thought. Can't do it. That which is the most important element of your very existence and your life is totally tangible and not tangible at the same time. Therefore, the thinking process, if you will, godly thinking, the brain of godly wisdom, Torah, emanating inside this world is very real and simultaneously not real. This is sort of, I'm going to just explain it. I hope I'm not going too off the track here, but I think, good. So let me take this a little bit higher and at the same time a little bit deeper. And I think hopefully you'll love the way this all folds together. Mm-hmm. You have a word in heaven. Sorry, that's funny. You have a word in Hebrew called heaven. But the Hebrew word for heaven is called Shemayim. I think we've talked about this. And Shemayim is made up of two Hebrew words, She'esh, which is fire, and Mayim, which is water, bizarro. two things which absolutely cannot exist together in the same place at the same time. And yet, the very fabric of heaven is fire and water simultaneous, meaning to say that God can resolve every and anything. So that's as to say, instead of calling it the Garden of Paradise, Gan Eden, we should be calling it the Garden of Paradox, because the incredible infinite wisdom of God, in our minds, our very limited perceptions, is to take things that just don't fit together and fit them together, i.e. fire and water, i.e. the physical form of the ark, and yet it has no space. So therefore, the concept of heaven coming down into this world, which is really what we're all here doing, trying to do good things to pull it down into its landing pod in the kingdom, bringing the crown to crown the queen, as we work on this process. So we're trying to bring something which will reveal this godly wisdom. But the ark, the Torah given at Sinai, inside that ark represents that godly thought of this world. And that godly thought is total paradox. It doesn't work in our brain. Our brain can't understand something occupying a physical space at the same time it doesn't physically exist. So therefore, on Yom Kippur, on the day that we can supersede human intelligence and begin to have a sampling of angelic intelligence, which is rooted in that world of paradox of fire and water, where for an angel, fire, water live together, of course, what are you talking about? What are you, a human? Right? So therefore, it's a clear thing for us to be able to perceive that. That perception enables us in our own sense, in our own temple, to find what's deep inside. And what happens when we go into our holy of holies on Yom Kippur? What happens when that pure little person, us, who maybe we don't give enough airtime to, which is our little own personal high priest, when that high priest goes into our holy of holies, what does he find? The answer is, he finds you. He finds you, the image of God that God made you in. And the contrast, that's what we say in the Zohar. We say that after a person goes up to heaven after 120 years, God is so excited. Imagine how excited you would be if your kid's been away for who knows how many years and he comes home. So God's so excited. You're off on that trip to earth for 120 years, and now you're coming home. So God, like a dad, which he is, comes running to see you. And he's so excited to see, what did you accomplish on your mission that I sent you on? And what happens is God pulls out this image of what God had in mind when he made you. And then here's the bad news. Maybe God sort of sees what you did with it. And the contrast between that is what we call hell. Because hell, I know Dante had a different approach, but it's not Jewish. His name wasn't originally Dantowitz, it was always Dante, right? So hell in Jewish thinking is busha. Busha means embarrassment. How embarrassed is it to be where this is what God wanted us to be? It gave us everything we could be to be that, and we wound up being that. So in God's love, because obviously it's not that big a surprise when we come home, because God's kind of watching us 24/7, God creates an opportunity down here. He drops down, like airlifts when they drop down goods to the soldiers on the front line. He drops down the wisdom to do tshuva, to repent. And the repentance doesn't mean to be fake religious. God sees through that. You can't play poker with God. It means to be real, to be who you really are. If you're great, that's not an ego trip. God made you great, so fine, but don't have to be all great about it. And if you're just a normal joke, that's also okay, because obviously God wanted you to be that. We can't compare ourselves to each other. It's so stupid. People in the newspaper, oh, look, he lived to 97. What is this, a race? Right? Every single person is their own world. You got to be the world that God wanted you to be, not what your magazines that you read try to get you to be, because they don't really care about you. They only care about selling you product with nice smiles and friendly faces. But if you really want to know who you are, go inside of yourself on Yom Kippur, and there you will find that image. And therefore, he gives us a day where we can scrub and work can't do it all in once, do it next Yom Kippur. When we got up last Yom Kippur, we weren't liars when we said, oh, next year. We don't do one night New Year resolutions. We get smashed drunk out of your mind. And by the morning, you forgot what it was. You probably violated it 50 times anyhow. We work for 10 days. From Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, we work hard. Nobody's getting drunk. We work hard and hard to really, really do the one thing that crushed Don Quixote. I don't know if you remember Mano La Mancha, Don Quixote, the man who went out and he fought the windmills. You remember how the doctor broke him in the end? He came in with the soldiers that had mirrors on their shields and surrounded him, forcing him to look at himself. Because as long as he could live in his little dream of fighting the windmills, he was happy. But to really see who he is, couldn't deal with it. That's horrible. That's so sad. You should look in the mirror and see your best friend. And that's what Yom Kippur gives you. It gives you the Torah, it gives you the wisdom to know how to fix every component of your life. And that's the happiest thing that can happen to you. And that's why Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year. It's not about because you don't eat. It's about because you come to real self-realization that enables you to be what God wanted you to be.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So basically, my understanding is that during the month of Elul, you essentially start getting in the mode of the high holidays, and you start like a reflective process. The king is in the field, and then
Right. Not Elvis.
On Rosh Hashanah, that's when you blow the shofar. It's essentially a call to repentance and almost like an announcement that we're in this time now, the 10 days of awe, right? And then is this right? I've heard this said elsewhere that your name is written in either the book of life on Rosh Hashanah, but then it's sealed on Yom Kippur, and that's for the coming year.
Yeah, that's first of all, I want to tell you something interesting about the days of awe. As you know, I have this expression I like to now use, and I refer to myself as a non-Gentile. So, as Gentiles call it awe, but us non-Gentiles, we call it days of oi. So, yes. So Rosh Hashanah, by the way, I just want to add on, you're correct 100% on the blowing of the shofar. The traditional use of shofar was to announce battle, going to war. And it was also used to call together congregation. It was also used to announce the freedom of the Jubilee year and so on. But the deeper level, one of the deeper levels of the shofar is that there comes a point in time where you got to get beyond words. Words don't work anymore. You can just talk and talk and talk. It's not that. When it comes to God, yeah, of course you have to talk, of course you have to pray, of course you have to get it out of your mouth, but there's something much deeper, and that's like the primordial scream. And that pure sound is the blast of the shofar. That's why the Jewish law requires that there are many types of animal horns, but the animal horn that we use has to have a bend in it. It has to be curved because it's like our bodies. I don't remember. I hope you don't remember this. Unfortunately, I do. There was once a heavy metal rock band called Twisted Sisters. So we are those twisted brothers and sisters. We're all like, when you get to be my age, you realize that Picasso was a realist. That's how we really look, with one eye over here and one other. That's realism, So therefore, when we're like that, what do? So the pure voice comes out. That's the sound of the shofar. And that's what God wants to hear. He wants to hear the real inner voice. And then you're right. Then begins the 10 days. Now, at Rosh Hashanah, which is a day of judgment, which is interesting because I think even in the non-Jewish world, in the astrological zodiac, the Hebrew month of Tishrei is often overlaps with Libra. And Tishrei has the same symbol as the Libra, which is the scales, because it's a time of judgment. So the books are open, the book of life and the book of death. Now, what's important to realize is it just says that they're open, but it doesn't say who inscribes them. And the answer is you do. That's your free will. And you go back in the Bible, you'll see God says, I put before you life and blessing and death and curse. And God says, I beg you to choose life. Now, why is God begging us? Because we're the one who writes it. We sign it with our own signature. So we really, and it's not just a conscious thing, it's a reality thing. It's our actions speak louder than our words. You know, we always say you can tell a person how he is by how he votes with his feet, you know, and so on. And so therefore our actions are already there over the last year. However, if you were the last year, you were a righteous person, not a saint, a righteous person, not to confuse the two. If you are a righteous person, then you have written your life already in the book of life. And why shouldn't you have more life? And a person who's God forbid, you know, it's interesting, the word for an evil person in Hebrew is called a rasha. But a rasha comes from the word rash, which means noise. Because really, 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 nobody's an evil person. It's just that we can make ourselves evil. And we can put so much filth and dirt and evil and anger and violence and hatred upon ourselves that we have completely suffocated that image of God inside of ourselves. That's called making yourself into an idol. I am the one who makes the decisions. Good luck with that. Okay, so that little person is trapped in their noise. But the good news is, if they can pierce that noise, which is what the sound of the shofar is designed to do, is to pierce that noise, it could be for a minute, a little window of light will come in, and that person will say, what am I, crazy? I'm messing with God, right? And that little consciousness could begin a whole opening to a whole life. But if not, then they're written in the book of death. However, for the rest of us, you and me and everybody else, 99% of us, who are not that righteous, and thank God not that evil, we're called Benoni, which comes from the word middle people. We have now 10 days to exhibit in these 10 days how we have upgraded from last year. And in that upgrading, if we succeeded, God willing, the culmination of it is on Yom Kippur. And as you know, because I know that you're deep into Kabbalah, so you know that the world is created through these 10 sefirot. These are the 10 power energies that God delegated to rule creation. And that's why they're 10 days on Yom Kippur.
And really quick, you guys, if you need a visualization of that, just do a search, like pause the video, look up Tree of Life, Judaism or Kabbalah, and you'll see the Tree of Life. It's 10 circles, and that's what we're talking about.
Right.
To be written in the book of death, are we talking about like an actual spirit, well, like some kind of record in heaven, or is this like metaphorical for the next year? Or what are the actual consequences of being written in the book of death?
Bad.
Like, is it actual like curses? Does it mean that you are going to die, like literally, like physically die the next year, or is it just like bringing upon yourself curses
No.
for the?
So first of all, let's talk about the word death. I think it might be very important. Excuse me. God is endless in love and mercy, rachamim, chesed, and so on. Look, I'll give you a perfect example. Who was the first guy who got written into the book of death?
Cain?
Before him.
Before him? I don't know. Adam, because he ended
Yeah.
up dying.
Not ended up. What did God say to Adam and Eve about eating from the fruit?
Oh, well, right. Okay, so in the day thereof, you shall.
Oh, the day, right? The day. You got that? Underline that word. The day they eat, they'll die. Did they?
Well, we've talked about this before. We were talking about the age of Adam and Eve and God's time, and so to like, and of course this is in Judaism, but it makes sense to me that that essentially he lived that long because it was in God's day.
Right.
So you know that way he didn't like within our time, within 24 hours, die and then no humanity.
Correct. And there you see, because God is always balancing justice and mercy. So justice means the law is the law. God said the day. But the mercy is God didn't say which day. So therefore, the mercy overrides the justice by saying one of God's days, which is 1,000 of our years. Because you didn't get that instant karma that the minute you went, the lightning went, right? That didn't happen. So you see that when it says even this, the very first man and woman who were inscribed in the book of death did not die right away. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is very interesting. 2 Hebrew words. The word for death, which is 2 letters, mem, tuf, which is mem is the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and tuf, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, spells met, which means death. However, if you take the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, aleph, and you attach it to the word death, now you have a phenomenal Hebrew word called truth, emet. Emet is something which is true from the very beginning, anywhere along the line, symbolized by the middle, and right down to the end. But if you take off the aleph, if you lose connection to that, if you lose connection to God, that is death. It doesn't matter when the body drops. That's almost immaterial. And if the body drops and it's not connected to the aleph, where does it go? It doesn't go where it would like to go, let's just say.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to take a little deeper, if you look at these 3 letters, these are the components of truth, and truth is called the signet of God in the world. So the letter aleph represents the Hebrew word ahava, which means love.
Mm-hmm.
The mem represents the word mitzvah, which are the commandments. And the last letter, tuf, represents the word Torah, which is the godly wisdom, which means to say that a person may have, I'm sorry, let's just roll it back. So therefore, the Torah element is the human wisdom, the mitzvot is the physical body, and the love is the heart. So if the person may have a lot of religiosity, sure you've met people like this, I have as well, very knowledgeable, so religious that they scare the willigers out of you and you tremble in front of them and all that kind of stuff, and your body sweats and so on, unimpressive to God, right? Because if they don't have that love, if when you stand before them, you don't melt with love because they are a conduit to appreciating this mere mortal makes me love God so much. Imagine what it would be like to actually love God. So they don't have that, they're dead. Even with all the holiness and all the wisdom and all the actions, it's met, it's dead. Instead, they have to be connected to love. They have to be connected to that. And when they are connected to that, they're connected to God. And even if a Nazi comes along and shoots them in the head, they're not dead. They just shed the vessel. The Nazi's dead. That Nazi's dead in this world and dead for sure in the next world. But the holy person is not dead. Just comes out. If God wants him to come back, he'll come right back in a different incarnation. This time a Ferrari, maybe, right? So that's really what the question of life or death is. It doesn't mean simply, although it can also simply, consuming more food over the next 364 days. It means that you're really alive. This is why our sages say, not so encouraging, but the sages say that most people who are living are not alive. And not all people who are dead are dead. Because if you are really madlik, as they say in Hebrew, which means lit up with the love and the wisdom, not just the love, because then you can do stupid things in the name of love, but you have wisdom and love, you have the scales, and you have the love, right? The justice and the mercy together. If you blend that, then you are eternally alive. And that's part of what Yom Kippur is all about as well, is getting to that place in us that really wants to live.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so Yom Kippur being the day that Moses comes down with the commandments and the Torah, and then Rosh Hashanah being one of the new years, but the new year in which the date changes. I seem to remember, because I was watching, I think it was like a year or two ago, I was watching a service at Park Avenue in New York. I was just like watching it online. And the rabbi there was talking about the fact that Rosh Hashanah it coincides with the completion of the creation of the earth, or it's like it has something to do with the day that the earth or the creation was finalized. Is that right?
Almost. The creation of the world happened on the 25th of Elul.
Okay.
And 6 days later is the first of Tishrei, i.e. Rosh Hashanah. What we commemorate on Rosh Hashanah is not the creation of the world. It's the creation of man.
Okay.
Man was created on the 6th day. And the whole purpose of creation was the creation of man.
Okay.
By the way, if I may, hope I'm not treading on anyone's toes here, but it's just curious. I'll leave it at that. If you study all the calendars in the world, I'll quickly, safely run over to the Chinese calendar. If you study all the calendars in the world, they all, and I'd love if you find me an exception, they all commemorate a very central, important moment in that people's / or religious being. Just look at all the calendars. Only calendar that doesn't do that, because really the Jewish calendar should be Shavuot. We became a nation and we are the chosen people. Chosen for what? I don't know, but we're chosen. And therefore we received the Torah, right? No. What do we commemorate? We don't commemorate anything. There's nothing Jewish about Rosh Hashanah. We commemorate the creation of man. The first man, the first woman, from whom came Africans and Asians and red-skinned people and freckle-skinned people and everybody. All human beings came from this two people. All of us, you and me, at some point in time, are brothers from our parents. And that's the day we celebrate. Why? Why don't we brag? Because the answer is that we're not here for us. We're here for God. And God made it that way. And therefore, the job of the world is not about my NFL team outscoring your NFL team. That's really off the chart. It's about us all working together to get back into the Garden of Eden as children of Adam and Eve. And therefore, the holiday of the creation of the world that we celebrate is not because it's about us. It's about all of us. Halavai, I mean, should only be everyone joins us because it's not ours. It's yours. You're also from Adam and Eve. And that's the function of the calendar, to remind us once again that we all come, because only once we forget about that, then my God's better than your God, and welcome to war.
Yeah.
But as long as we remember that, it's called welcome to unity. And that's what we try to bring back each time on that Rosh Hashanah.
Is that why it's a 2-day holiday? Because like the first of Tishri would be, you know, the 6th day of creation and man, and then the second day would correspond to the 7th day. Is that why?
No, but I like that. I like what you're saying. I always joke. I always say that because originally it's not 2 days. If you look in the Bible, it's only 1 day. It only became 2 days under the auspices of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai towards the end of the Second Temple. And I'll explain that in a minute. But I felt that maybe what happened was, okay, fine. God says like this, okay, fine. How many? I got Adam and I got Eve. Okay, fine. Got Noah. He might cleared out everybody. Now we only got Noah. Yeah, fine. But now, whoa. Now I got like 1 billion people. I can't do this in 1 day. I need another day, which is obviously not clear. But it feels like God says, no way. I need a second day. Just too many people down there to cover all this. But the simple answer was, simple, whatever that means. The simple answer was that when in order to sanctify the new moon in the days of the temple required witnesses giving testimony in front of the Sanhedrin, the great court.
Yeah.
And they could come anytime during the day. On one particular day, they came very, very late, but it's still within the window. But however, because they were so late, and it had never been that late, the priests in the temple made the assumption that it was not going to be a 2-day event, and therefore they performed the service as if it was the 1 day, and then they came in, and that created a kind of a chaos. And to make that never happen again, So the chief rabbi at the time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, decreed that from now on, it will automatically always be 2 days. That's the simple level of how it came about. But, I don't know if you know the term bat kol. Bat kol is Hebrew. It literally means the daughter of voice. Bat is a daughter, kol is a voice, a sound. But what it means is when you hear God's voice coming out of heaven. And therefore, many times, God speaks out of heaven. You just gotta make sure it's God. But let's say we're in those situations where you're sure it's God, because there are also a lot of fakers up there as well trying to trick you. But let's say it's really God. So there's one thing God never, ever, ever said, and he'll never say, and that is, whoops.
Yeah.
There's no whoops in heaven. So therefore, it was like, whoops. They blew the witnessing, and look at that. Now I'm stuck with a 2-day Rosh Hashanah. No. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that as the world is evolving all within the perfect plan of God, different moments in time become milestones. Like, for example, the coming of the Messiah. So that will be a milestone. It's not happened yet. Or let's say, according to some people, hasn't happened yet, right? I'm not really good into numbers. I always tell I have some very, very religious, I always mispronounce this, evangelicals. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, evangelicals, yeah.
Yeah. And so we always say, so listen, you know what? I have a great idea. Instead of getting hung up on he was here and now he's coming back, or it's his first time, why don't we just work together and get him here? Wouldn't that be like more intelligent to do? And when he's here, one of us will go and say, excuse me, Mr. Messiah, sir, but does this look familiar? Have you been here before? And whatever he says. But what do you care? If it's the real McCoy, that's all that's important. Okay, enough of that. But the point is therefore, in these milestones of unfolding history, now you have a 2-day. Well, what was that all about? Obviously, it was in God's mind from creation, but it hadn't reached that point. So they got to understand what's the difference between the first and the second day, and it's a very beautiful difference. On the first day, when you got on the when an old man came on the bus and you got up to give him your seat, you were really trying to do the will of God. And God makes a note on the first day. But on the second day, you didn't realize that somebody sitting in the back of the bus who maybe isn't that big a fan of Mormons and knows that you're a Mormon and saw you get up for that elderly person, said, whoa, look at that. That guy's sincere. He's the real thing. You didn't know that happened, but without your even knowing it, you sanctified the name of God in that person's eyes in the back of the bus. So that's the second day. The first day is what we mean to do in the world, and the second day is how it appears in the world. And those are the two elements of who we are. The Gemara says if somebody calls you a donkey, ignore them. But if 2 people call you a donkey, go out and buy a saddle, because you really have to learn what people tell you, because it's God in some way speaking indirectly to us. That's also part of that Rosh Hashanah process. You want to know who you are, not just who you think you are, but also how you are perceived.
So I know that on Rosh Hashanah, there's like certain services that you attend, and I watched like when they blew the shofar, and I sorry, I don't remember exactly how they called it, but I remember the words like tekiah and trua, and I know that there's like a
excellent, you got it, man. That's it. Tekiah, trua, and shvarim.
Yeah. So there's like specific services on that, well, on both days, I guess.
Except on Shabbat. Like this year, we only blew on the second day because you don't blow on the first day.
Okay.
But on a normal year, yes, it'd be the same for the 2 days.
And then on Yom Kippur, there's no temple, but are there, I'd imagine there's like certain services that you attend on that day.
Well, yeah. I mean, the temple is our synagogue at this point. It's a, bookmarker.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then coming up, we have Sukkot, and it, because like you have like these like spring days. You also have the ones here in the fall, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. How does the timing work with Sukkot? Like how did that become the day of Sukkot? Like we talked about why Rosh Hashanah is on that day, Yom Kippur, what they go back to, commemorate. What about Sukkot?
Right. Well, I don't know why you brought back a memory. When I used to live in the old city in Jerusalem, I had a really big sukkah. And once there were some American Christian tourists going by, and I had a problem with the light, and I wasn't able, because I'm Jewish, I'm not allowed to deal with the light. And so I asked them, would they like to come up to my sukkah and have a drink? And I knew by then they would be nice enough to sort of fix the light for me. So they very nice, and they came up, and I was blown away. The two of them, my husband and wife, they jumped back when they saw this, and they said, the sukkah of the Lord. And I said, wow, I wish I had that level of awareness that these two people had. And then they said to me, the Feast of the Tabernacles. I said, you know what? Maybe you don't have to like eat my sukkah. Could you just, you don't have to feast on my tabernacle. But anyhow, so that's just you brought back that memory. So the idea of the sukkah is really like this. It was a lot of things, but the simple thing is, now that you pop out of Yom Kippur, see, the thing is like this. When you get in touch with the angel in you, it breaks your ego wall, right? I think I once somebody told me ego stands for edging God out. So when you break your ego wall, guess what? You can hug your friend, because you're not standing there. I don't like that guy. He doesn't like me. That's gone. Hey, he's an angel. I'm an angel. And we're both creating the image of God. And we both come out of an Eve. Oh, I love you. So all of a sudden, what happens is when each person pops out as a brand new person, now we have to create community. And that's what the sukkah is all about. We now create a new facility, but the facility brings the lessons of what we learned on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And that is, while we do have to do things in the human world that we live in, we have to be able to see through it. So the covering of the sukkah has to enable me to see the stars. Yes, I take things that grow out of this world, I cut them from their umbilical cord of the physical world, I put them on top of the skak to raise them to a level of holiness, but I have to know it's not my hands. I see through the facade and realize it's all from God. That's the sukkah. That's seeing through the physical world that God's behind everything. And therefore, when I do that and I create that sukkah, so it creates national unity. But national unity is not enough for a Jew. For us, unless there's peace everywhere in the world, then there is no peace. Maybe it's P-I-E-C-E. But world peace is the world's peace. And that's why Sukkot is the only holiday of all of the holidays where we actually offer 70 offerings corresponding to the inner core of all the nations of the world.
And then other bowls, right? 70 bowls.
That's 70 bowls. They correspond to the 35 nations of the West and the 35 nations of the East. Not obviously there are more, but these are the primary vibrations of which all, like you have the branches, but then you have all the little leaves. Those are the nations per se, but the real branches are these 70 faces of the Torah, 70 nations of the world. Jacob comes into Egypt to create Israel with 70 souls. This is the vehicle, 7 times creation of 7 days times 10, which is its perfection. This might sound like Chabad, 770. So therefore, you have this whole idea of that as far as we're concerned, it's all of us or none of us. It's not about the Jews. And that's why if you look in Isaiah 56:7, you'll see that the third temple is all about all of us. It's a prayer for all of the people of the world. And so therefore, the idea of Sukkah is always about the future. That's why you'll find very interesting. There are 3 primary holidays, call them pilgrimages. There are 3 times when the Jews had to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. First is Passover, second is Shavuot, and third is Sukkot. Now, those 3 always have to be in the order of Passover being 1, Shavuot 2, and Sukkot 3. But look what happens. Sukkah, which is the 3rd, is already in the next year. Because before you get to the Sukkah relevant to this year, you've crossed the Rosh Hashanah date line. So Sukkah, therefore, I'm being very shallow here, but Sukkah transcends into the future. That's why the Sukkah is always associated with the future. Harachaman hu yakim lanu et Sukkat David, that in the days of end, God will reestablish the Sukkah of King David. So that idea of the Sukkah of King David is King David will rule the entire world. His Sukkah will protect and cover the world.
That's really interesting. Okay, and then if the temple was built right now, you would have
Hold on. Nope, not yet.
You would have
Let's look out the window.
huh? Oh.
I can just look out the window. You have to wait for CNN.
And if you don't know, he's referring to, there's like different ideas about how the temple may come into being. Maybe it'll actually be built by Jews, obviously, or it could come out of heaven. So he was just checking to make sure it hadn't come out of heaven yet. So, but whenever it does come back, there's things that take place in there, and one of the primary things is the two goats, right? The scapegoat, and then there's
Right, the
I'm
twin
not
goats.
too up to speed with it, but how does that go?
That they're twin goats.
Oh, they have to be twins?
Right. And then the high priest does a kind of a mystical arbitrational lottery where he has these two tabs of wood, one called Azazel, which is the one that is thrown out of the temple, and then one which says to God. And he says that the one to God will now be the stick eye, and it's in a dark box, and he actually pulls out, and everyone sees it's that, and then the other one, and one of them is then given and sent out of the city, and they tie, I forgot how you call this in English, I'll just say purple for lack of better words, a big purple cloth, or I remember crimson red cloth hanging off the entrance of the temple, and then miles away, when that animal is given to the other side, then at its death, that crimson turns white. And then the other animal, which is still alive, then it, in contrast, is offered with its blood, actually brought into the Holy of Holies with the sprinkling against, or the holies, the sprinkling against the tent. Now, the question is, what the heck is going on? Right? I mean, God's giving a bribe to the other side. Is there really another side? Can't be, right? If there's really another side, then there's not God, because God's not one. Then there's God and the bad guys. So on a certain level, yeah, we say that. But, once you it's like puppeteers. Once you actually look up, you see it's just one person holding both of the strings, just God. There's no such thing except God. So here's a crazy concept. The crazy concept is that it's one thing to think that you are, not you, I mean, in general, a person is righteous and they stand for good and they do the ba-ba-ba and they fight the evil and they slaughter the evil. There's a higher level. The higher level is you get the evil itself to become good and nobody gets slaughtered. And so therefore, once you really realize that nothing exists without the will of God, even the bad guys, they're all being financed by God. And so God reminds them, so to speak, I am the one who gives you life. And I don't want you to do what you're doing. But I'll still support you. I'll still give you free will, because that's what this world's all about. But I do it on the hope that you'll realize who's feeding you, and someday even your evil will be rejected and you will come and live as one. That's what it's about. It's not the good guys beating the bad guys. It's about all of us coming back to being one. And that's the lesson of Yom Kippur.
Two questions. Going back
I just want you to know I'm now back on the pay system with Zoom, so we could go another 4 hours without our normal break.
I was wondering about that. I was like,
I was afraid you didn't notice. I was just like, until the sun comes up.
So with us, okay, so with taking the scapegoat out of the city, like let's say that the temple was here today, would the city be considered the old city, or would it be considered the borders that it is, right, or the city limits that it is right now, including West Jerusalem? Or is that like something that's even like knowable at this point?
Well, it was a very good question. I mean, the most beautiful questions are the one that bring the holy ideas down to practical terms, because otherwise it's just cerebral gymnastics. So according to our tradition, it's not so clear. But there is one passage in the Talmud that says that Jerusalem in those days will become the size of all of Israel. And all of Israel will be like the map that Bibi Netanyahu just used a couple of days ago.
Saw that.
Yeah, that was well received at the United Nations. Whoops, sorry, world's not ready for this yet. Oops, sorry. Pay no attention to that guy behind the curtain. Anyhow, so that therefore if that's the case, now the other thing you got to be aware of that there are very powerful opinions that there'll be no more animal sacrifices in the future temple. It'll only be grains.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure how that will impact the two seir, the two goat offerings.
So we would just have to kind of see how that plays out.
Yeah,
and did you say
tuned.
that? And did you say that the other goat that stays, that the high priest, did you say that he sprinkles the blood on the veil of the temple, or
the curtain which separates the holy from the holy of holies?
Okay, like on the outside of it, like facing the holy of holies, or like from the inside?
Yes. No,
okay.
On the outside. Yeah.
Did he?
The only thing that goes on the inside is the incense that he brings in.
Oh, he brings incense in on Yom Kippur.
Yeah, only one time a year.
Okay.
So, by the way, you want to hear a kind of cool thing. I don't know. Well, you're probably really up to speed on what the temple and the tabernacle structure and things like that look like. So in the book of Ezekiel, see, got the English. In the book of Yechezkel.
There you go, you did it.
Yeah, I'm getting there. In chapters, I don't know, 30 something towards the end, he brings these details of what the third temple will look like. Now, one of the things that he has, which is different than the way it was in the first and the second, are you have three, but let's say you come into the Holy of Holies. There are two walls and a back wall. These three walls have 3 floors, and they have numerous cubicles or little, you know what it reminds me of? Like in the old theaters, like that place where Lincoln sat when he got shot in the head. Those little
like a balcony booth type thing.
Yeah. That's interesting. Booth. And it was shot by a guy named Booth.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. Okay. So anyhow, so you have like these little booths up there, but nobody ever goes there. Crazy. What are they there for? So I'm not going to go into this with you, but I'll tease you.
Oh,
really?
Okay, fine.
I got to give the little puck room to play also. So it says in the Torah that no man shall be with the high priest when he goes into that room.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Like a scene out of Star Wars.
And I actually just kind of read about this recently about Ezekiel. He talks about the city itself having, well, in fact, this is great that we're talking about this, because I was wondering about this. He was talking about the 3 gates on each side of the city for the 12 tribes, but they're not in the order, for example, that Israel was camped around the Mishkan. Do you know why there would be that change? Because I would assume that it would just kind of stay the same order. Do you know why that would change?
Tumble lock.
Huh?
A tumble lock.
A tumble lock?
Yeah, you have to you go that way and then go that way until it goes click.
So it's like a code.
Yeah, exactly. And each stage is a different code until it goes click, and that'll be the click at that point.
Wait, you'd have to really serious?
Very serious. Sure. I'm only saying this to you because I know we spent a lot of time going over the tribes, their names, their positions, and so on. It's funny because every time now I'm watching an NFL game, I'm thinking of you. They're all like little slots, you know. Anyhow, so the more you understand what each one is and what the flag represents and under which horoscope they're fixing and so on, and how they're rotating in time and the different 4 New Years and all of these different things, so then you'll understand that which Ezekiel is showing you is the final formula. How when they all line up like that, then that's the click.
Really?
Well, stay tuned.
Because like we were talking about, for example, how each one is associated with one of the months of the year of the Hebrew calendar.
That's right.
So would that imply that I guess during the Messianic era or like sometime in the future, time itself would change?
Yes. In fact, you've seen that happen already. If you look at the War of Sisera, you will see there that Joshua was using different stars to fight the battle. If you look even at Joshua in a different battle where he stopped the sun, just like Moses stopped the sun in the battle against Amalek. So, and you look at Abraham, when God says, get out of your tent and look at the stars. Well, what did Abraham see? He saw God moving the stars around, rearranging them, because the astrological star said Abraham will never have a child. And God said, well, don't believe that. Watch. And suddenly the star said that you'll have billions of children. So don't forget, the astrological stars and their shape and form and time are nothing but servants of God. They occupy the position when God commands them and will move when God tells them to do so. Very important not to be locked into linear time. Linear time is an aspect, it's not a reality.
That's really interesting. And speaking of stars, in Judaism, they view them the same way that we see, our star, the sun, like that. Those other stars also, because we've talked about that there's a belief. I think he said that there's like 18,000 other worlds,
other intelligent planets, right?
In Judaism. Would it be the same, like where they would see other stars as being stars that have planets around them? How does it work?
I understand what you're asking. It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I just don't know the answer. Between planets are usually called by, and in Hebrew, star is called kochav, which is kaf bet, which is 22, because it's through his 22, and there's his meaning God. God used the 22 letters to create the universe. So, and these stars all have different impact. Don't forget, if you made a huge box and you put all of the galaxies into it, that's this creation that we live in. But that's just one channel on God's Netflix. There are other creations which we don't have the software to even imagine them. And with all due respect to Lucas, he didn't even touch upon it. But within that box called creation, right? Sometimes get very offended. What do you mean there's other intelligent life forms? We're the ones who are, oh, really? That's very humble. Anyhow, so within this box of creation, here are 18,000 other inhabited intelligent life forms. But beyond that, who can even begin to imagine what they are? But all these energies are created by God in a way where they have an interplay. So to the point where, for example, it's said as this, but I'll explain it as that. It says that no blade of grass grows without an angel telling each blade, grow, grow, grow. But that is how we understand is the influence of the stars. Just like we see on a simple level, how the tides are controlled by the moon. So therefore, the galaxies all play into these elements of what we are dealing with here in the world, or in our world.
It's fascinating stuff.
Sure. How can it not be? It's from God.
Before we wrap up, because I'll need to end in just a minute here. Back to Sukkot. Is there a specific reason why it starts when it does? Like, does it correspond to some event in the past? We talked about how you come out of Yom Kippur, you've experienced your kind of like elevated self, you've gone into your holy of holies. Now it's time to be a community and think of the world as well, the nations. But so I understand that connection, but is there a reason why it starts on the day that it does?
Yes, it's the opposite end of the pole from Passover night.
Oh, it is?
Sure. Passover is the 15th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, and Sukkot is the 15th of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, which are exactly 6 months apart. So Passover is the holiday about introspection, where we go into our homes, we have our Seder, we recall the acts of God in Egypt, and we build ourselves as a nation. But its culmination is 6 months later on Sukkot, where now that we're that nation, we have to fulfill what God wants us to do, which is to bring tikkun olam, to bring rectification to the whole world, never to forget the other nations and that they're all created by God. And all of us have to get back to the Garden of Eden.
Okay. Well, this was a good discussion today. I'm glad that I didn't ask any, like, you guys, in the future, I'll ask some of your questions, but I wanted to talk about this because, we've been talking about Yom Kippur a little bit. This year is the 50-year anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which is interesting. And I don't know if you saw this, but on Yom Kippur, there were 3 asteroids that passed by the Earth, and the Jerusalem posted a story about that. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially since it was the 50-year anniversary since the war. Okay, maybe just a little bit more. You weren't there yet in Israel, were you?
No, I saw the Yom Kippur War on TV, and I said, okay, I'm out of Syracuse.
Yeah. Do you know any like veterans from that war, or like do you ever?
Oh, many of my neighbors right here.
Really? It's interesting because I was reading that was the war that Israel came the closest to being defeated compared to, say, the 6-Day War or the War of Independence.
That's right. And that's why God wanted us to remember that even that war was from God, and he made it on the day of Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Okay. But so what year did you come to Israel?
74. Yom Kippur War 73.
Okay. So like immediately after that.
Yeah. Next. And I left America. I didn't really think about this, but in hindsight, it's kind of funny. I left America on the 4th of July, 7474.
Really?
Yeah. On 1974, 4th of July.
That is funny.
It is funny. Yeah. So this, does God willing, this coming in 2024 will be 50 years.
Wow. That's crazy.
It is crazy. What's even crazier is how fast time flies, even if you're not having fun.
Yeah. Well, I wish this year would maybe hurry up a little bit. I've had a lot of stuff I've had to deal with this year, but we might have to buy a new septic tank, which is going to be expensive.
Right. But, well, it should all go well for you.
Thank you. All right, you guys. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. And actually put your questions in the comments of this video for next time, and we'll try and get to it. What was that?
For next Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Then make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, and I'll talk to you guys later.